fan?
No, I'm a Met fan.
No, you must be joking.
No, some of us in the Bronx in the 60s and 70s were Met fans.
Oh,
Those
that
were
you
dark
must have a
days.
strong contrarian streak there.
Yeah,
All right.
I think that's probably fair.
Okay, so but the point I'm trying to establish is that for Andy McCarthy, suddenly hit with these characters who tried to kill his fellow New Yorkers, the world of Islam and Muslim theology is an entirely new world.
That's exactly right.
And you dove into it.
Yes. Well, you have to dive into it. The great thing about a criminal trial, there's a lot of downsides to them, but the great thing about it is that you can't win one with politically correct nostrums. You actually have to prove evidence and give the jury a sensible explanation for why people do what they do, which means as the prosecutor, your obligation is to get an accurate read on why they do what they do, because juries demand to know the motivations of.
In Willful Blindness, you write about, quote, the chasm between the Islam of Western fantasy and the Islam that actually exists. Give me a couple sentences on what you mean.
Well, the ideology we're dealing with, it would be wonderful if it was a fringe group of lunatics who had perverted or hijacked an otherwise peaceful doctrine. In fact, we're dealing with an ideology that is 14 centuries old, has commanded the allegiance of the rich and the poor, the old and the young, the educated and the uneducated. It's got a deep pedigree. It is rooted in a literal interpretation of the Islamic scriptures, and it probably commands the allegiance of hundreds of millions of people. Not all of whom would become terrorists, but many of whom share the goals of the terrorists.
President Bush on September 17, 2001, I quote, Islam is peace, close quote.
Sorry. Wrong.
He's just plain wrong.
No, he's wrong.
Willful blindness again. Jihad, I mean, you talk about Islam, but jihad won't go away. There would be no Muslim world without it, close quote. Tell me what it means and tell me why you say it won't go away, why it's central to a Muslim understanding of
jihad is most accurately understood as holy war. It is the struggle to expand the Islamic world. It is the means by which there is an Islamic world, because that's how Islam was mostly spread, by the sword, not by peaceful persuasion. And there have been admirable efforts to redefine it, because it's a very troublesome term. But the fact is, it is a divine...
You mean admirable efforts, sort of efforts on behalf of reform within the Muslim world?
And without, you know, I think there are Western people who are sympathetic to Islam, don't want to see the world as a clash of civilizations, and therefore are trying to help them reform. But of course, we can't do that. It has to be reformed from within. And the problem with the reform is the people who are doing the reform sound to the Muslim world like the people who are dancing on the head of a pin, whereas the jihadists themselves, the people we refer to as jihadists or terrorists, are the ones who seem to be more authentic, because their interpretation
from within the tradition.
Exactly. They are rooted solidly in the scriptures.
Let me present two ends of a spectrum. On one end, the founder of Islam himself engages in violence. We know that as a matter of the historical record, or at least of the legends that have grown up around him. One way or the other, you look at the founder and you see a man who engaged in violence himself. And in the early first 2 or 3 centuries of Islam, the religion spreads primarily by the sword. This is by contrast, obviously, with Christianity, where the founder not only doesn't kill people, but dies himself, and before it becomes the official Roman religion. For 3 centuries, Christianity spreads by persuasion. You've got a sharp contrast. So you've got the notion here that Islam is inherently expansionist, dangerous, intolerant. One end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum, Daniel Pipes, quote, radical Islam is the problem and moderate Islam is the solution, close quote. This end of the spectrum, Islam is complicated culturally, religiously, doctrinally, but there are people with whom we can work, and it's our job to encourage the moderates. Inevitable class of civilizations, let us gird for war because it's coming at us. Intellectual war, a cultural war, not necessarily, and perhaps, well, we were at war in Iraq. Over here, wait a minute, let's slow down, let's work very hard to find the people with whom we can work and encourage them. Where's Andy McCarthy on that spectrum?
Somewhere in the middle, but closer to the harsher interpretation. I am a great admirer of Daniel Pipes. But in this particular, I think that I'm waiting for the moderates to emerge that he speaks about, and I've been waiting for them for a long time. I've actually tried to empower them myself, but I don't think that you can empower them unless you come accurately to grips with what the dynamic is that you're dealing with, and that I don't think we've done. By acknowledging or by conceding that there is a vibrant moderate Islam, which I don't actually see the evidence of, I think we are, in a way, stopping it from developing, because we're allowing a lot of people who are not moderates and who actually mean us harm to operate under the radar screen and infiltrate throughout our society and particularly throughout our government. This government's interpretation of moderate Islam, unfortunately, is if you are not today in the act of blowing up a building, you're capable of being a moderate. As long as you say that you want the immoderate things that you want to impose, like Sharia, you're willing to impose through a political process. And I don't think that's moderation.
All right.